One dull clang against rock, and then a hollow snap, brittle, like glass in a fire. It began with a shovel. The gardener froze. It was early spring 2025, and the Alhambra's lower gardens were undergoing restoration. The team had expected clay, irrigation piping, maybe old Moorish tiles, but what surfaced instead were bones, hundreds of them. By the third day, the archaeologists had stopped speaking. Tiny, porous, stained deep ochre by centuries of blood and soil. The forensic team unearthed rows, not graves, not ordered coffins, but scattered remains, shattered ribs, broken jaws, the curved vertebrae of children no older than 12. Some were piled like compost, others crushed beneath flagstones. The count reached 4. No tombstones, no names, just a shallow layer of lime dust. Medieval pest control. Unregistered remains of probable medieval origin, likely a burial site from pre-Christian Granada. When the news reached Spain's historical commission, the official statement read, "But those who knew the grounds, the layout, the structure, the undocumented tunnels, knew better. This was not a graveyard. This had once been Queen Isabella's private garden. Born in 1451, she entered a world torn into warring fragments. Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and the last shimmering vestige of Al-Andalus. And Isabella, beloved saint, architect of Spain, and self-proclaimed mother of the nation, had always kept her garden immaculate. Before Spain, there was Isabella. Her early life was spent in the shadow of half-brothers and fragile alliances. Yet, by 23, she outmaneuvered every rival, seized the throne of Castile, and wed Ferdinand of Aragon, not for love, but for unity. She was not meant to rule. Together, they invented Spain. Isabella's image was carefully built, the pious queen in white linen, the sword-bearing mother, the torch of Christian order. But behind the saintly glow stood a woman of steel. She spoke 4 languages, negotiated with popes, and broke treaties with a smile. Her court became a nerve center of power, faith, and propaganda. She did not just govern, she purified. In her mind, Spain was not yet clean, not while Muslims still held Granada, not while Jews practiced in secret, not while foreign blood worked in Christian homes. The Alhambra, once the jewel of the Nasrid dynasty, became her crown, and within it she planted roses, fountains, and prayer altars. She also planted silence. So she began to cleanse. Converted orphans, stripped from Morisco and Jewish families, were assigned to palace labor. Too young for conscription, too foreign for schooling, they were labeled pobres del jardín, poor of the garden. They were never recorded by name. At dawn, they swept the dew from the stones. At dusk, they carried baskets of thorns. Their wages were meals. Their sleep came on burlap. The court called them blessed pests, servants of God's natural order. But they worked. She only saw lilies blooming. By 1485, the Reconquista neared its end. Granada trembled, and Isabella rejoiced. The queen saw none of this, but her victories came at a price. Wars drained the treasury, and her vision of a Christian empire demanded not just weapons, but symbols, monuments, gardens, processions, and children. Dozens, then hundreds, of laborers appeared in the Alhambra records as non-entities. To the court, they were resources. They were never paid, never tallied in church rosters. Most were children from newly Christianized households, their parents imprisoned, exiled, or vanished. They arrived bearing no surnames, only baptism. To Isabella, they were invisible. There are letters, unsigned but preserved, from court maids and gardeners. Her indulgence was not cruelty, but something stranger, denial. She ordered fountains built from holy stone, knowing the workers bled on the scaffolds. She praised the scent of jasmine, while boys hauled manure through the tunnels beneath her chamber. They speak of children sleeping in corners of the chapel, coughing blood into handkerchiefs, praying before statues that would not answer. One girl, named only Maria, died from heat stroke at 11. Her body left beneath the pomegranate trees for 3 days before removal. Isabella never saw it. When rats overtook the kitchen stores that same summer, a physician advised purging the lower cellars, or chose not to. Fleas and lice had infested the laundry halls. "Unclean spirits dwell in young flesh," he wrote. "Let the smallest be offered back to the soil." A week later, 23 children disappeared from the eastern quarters. The Queen blessed the new basil garden. The basil grew wild. It began with whispers, a boy seen crawling from the gardens with bite marks on his arms, a maid who found bloody footprints outside the Queen's chapel and fainted at the sight. But nothing was confirmed. Nothing ever was. By 1490, the palace rats had vanished. So had the bees. Insects no longer hovered by the citrus trees. Courtiers praised the air. Miraculously clean, they said. But servants knew better. They knew what was buried beneath the mulch. Flesh made offering. Some children began showing signs of sickness, seizures, rot, skin so pale it seemed translucent. They labored anyway, day and night, under the guise of penance. When a group of court musicians arrived from Toledo and saw the pale figures digging in silence among the ivy, one asked, "Are they monks?" That spring, a thunderstorm tore up part of the northern garden beds. A small leg bone surfaced, still wearing a leather strap. "No," a guard replied, "they're cleaner than monks." The gardeners were ordered to replace the soil with lime and ash. The Queen's confessor, Father Hernando de Talavera, later wrote in a private journal, "No priest was summoned, no burial rites performed. It is better for one garden to be pure than for many children to stray. Pestilence takes many forms. We are merely pruning." The court's silence hardened. Dignitaries from Rome and Florence came to tour the Alhambra. They marveled at the lilies, unaware they bloomed from burial. They dined while a boy named Matteo choked beneath the floorboards, where he had been sent for coughing during Vespers. The garden sickness was never named. Those who knew the truth found themselves trapped. They were not allowed to speak of what they had seen, nor were they allowed to leave. Not in letters, not in sermons, not even in whispers beyond the palace walls. In 1491, the royal steward issued a new directive. All orphaned workers under 12 would be relocated for sanitary reasons. No records followed, no families inquired. But inside the Alhambra, it became protocol. That same year, an edict was signed authorizing cleansing of the grounds through divine labor. What it meant in practice was disappearance. The Queen's own laundresses began wearing gloves, soaked in vinegar. Priests carried rosemary in their sleeves. Lime pits were dug quietly behind the spice orchards. No one called it a cemetery. They called it composting. The Alhambra's archivist was ordered to burn all references to undocumented children in the employment rolls. 10 years of scribal ink vanished in one afternoon. And when questioned, they spoke of vermin. A fresh ledger was bound in lambskin and stored in the cathedral archives. It listed garden expenses, rosary beads, lavender oil, nothing more. One court physician who attempted to raise concerns was relocated to a priory in Navarra. He died the next year, reportedly from a fall. They've been returned to God's earth, like apple seeds. When a new Jesuit visitor from Sicily asked where the garden hands had gone, a noblewoman replied, "The Archbishop himself officiated." Soon after, a mass was held in the Queen's private chapel. The sermon praised the unburdening of the land and likened weeds to heresy. No investigation followed. The children were never missing. They had simply never existed, because officially nothing had happened. Roses in perfect rows, ivy wound through imported marble, cypress trees rose like sentinels, silent, unmoving, guarding secrets rooted deep. A decade passed. The garden bloomed, and with it, so did the memory of the garden pests. Isabella's court transformed the space into legend. They named it El Jardín de la Reina Pura, the Garden of the Pure Queen. painters were commissioned to immortalize it. One canvas, still displayed in the royal collection, shows the queen standing among lilies, hands folded, as cherubic children gather wildflowers at her feet. The transformation was strategic. They never blink. They never move. None of those children had names. Children sang hymns there during feast days. In 1502, Isabella signed the Edict of Conversion for all remaining Muslims in Castile. The garden became a stage, her sanctified Eden proof of divine order. Ambassadors from the Holy Roman Empire marveled at its serenity. Priests declared it holy ground. Pilgrimages began. Their voices rose above soil filled with bones. The Queen's confessor published a devotional titled The Orchard of Obedience. It was gifted to noble brides upon marriage, a guide to silence, service, and sacrifice. Perfumed incense masked the smell of rot. Choirs were trained to hit just the right note at dusk. When the wind turned, over time, even whispers faded. No one asked why lilies grew faster in one quadrant than another. No one mentioned that the original orchard once fed itself with child labor. A rose said to have bloomed from the Queen's own tears, and in their place, relics appeared. A vine that twined itself into the shape of a cross, and at the center, a small white statue of an angel kneeling beside a shovel. No longer merely queen, she was now saintly, mythic, a mother to the soil itself. As the last Muslim emir left Granada under escort, Isabella's legacy was already being recast, and the garden reflected this fiction. What had once been a worksite, echoing with small feet and quiet cries, became a stage for ritual performance. Statues of angels replaced the laborers. No names, no plaques. Porcelain children stood in alcoves, their expressions frozen in joy. Each wore white, each carried a lily, each was indistinguishable from the next. Just purity. Court masons, once builders of cloisters and crypts, were hired to install marble benches where children had once bent over weeds. The Queen's garden was now a sacred place, one where history had been erased and rewritten in stone. Every symbol told a lie. The cisterns were renamed fountains of renewal. A cracked stone, used for sharpening pruning shears, was engraved with the words, "The irrigation ditches where children once collapsed were recast as holy rivulets." Recruited from distant provinces, dressed in white, like the ghosts they replaced. Here knelt the Queen to pray for peace, and the choir boys. Every mass they sang the same hymn, Laude Pueri, praise the children. None of them knew why they sang it. Visitors left roses at the feet of the angel statue, unaware that its pedestal sat atop a pit of bones. A local gardener, hired in 1896, once tried to dig beneath it for pipe repair. He found something white, brittle, small. He never returned to work. The project was cancelled. The palace didn't report it, but it added another rosebush. By the early 16th century, Isabella's garden had become legend.